Well, we're looking at the book of Leviticus that we're trying to go through chronologically as much as possible. And we've built a tabernacle, and now we need some instructions on how we're to worship in that tabernacle and what it's all about. And so if we look at the very end of the book of Leviticus in chapter 27, verse 34, it says these are commands that the Lord gave Moses on Mount Sinai. So it's very clear that Moses was given specific instructions about what the tabernacle was for and how worship was to be conducted in it. And if you read through carefully the book of Leviticus, you'll see a great deal of detail given to the ways of worship there in Leviticus. But I want to point out just a few things to you that I think are really important. One of the things that we've said many times before is that you'll never fully understand the New Testament until you understand the Old Testament, and vice versa. And today is a perfect example of that, because we have in these instructions in Leviticus a high priest, critical, a mediator. And we see also in Leviticus today the need for a separated life and an atonement for sin. And certainly, as we look towards the New Testament, we see that the same thing is required, a superior sacrifice, or a sacrifice to be made. And you heard me say several times the word typology. Today, I'm going to be able to give you a sample of where you get typology from as far as it being truly a biblical principle. And then finally, we have the need for a covenant between ourselves and God. And obviously, when God set up this place of worship and this method of worship, he asked them to enter into a covenant with him. And today we want to see in the New Testament the superior covenant. So without any further ado, let's take a look. A superior mediator. Hebrews chapter 4, verses 14 through 16. Let me say it again for you. When we look at Leviticus, we see a need for a mediator, a high priest. It's critical to the way of worship. In the New Testament, we find in Hebrews 4:14 through 16, therefore, since we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our confession. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in all things as we are, yet without sin. Therefore, let us draw near with confidence to the throne of grace, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in the time of need. In the Old Testament, we saw sacrifice, and we saw the need for a mediator. In New Testament and Hebrews, we see a superior mediator, the person of Jesus Christ, with a superior atonement. So when we look at the second section in in Leviticus, we see that we need to live a separated life, and when that separated life is not existent, we find that there's a atonement that has to be paid for sin, and there's a need for a sacrifice. Which brings us to Hebrews chapter 9, verses 12 through 14. Not through the blood of goats and calves, but through his own blood, that is Jesus, he entered the holy place once for all, having obtained eternal redemption. For if the blood of goats and bulls and ashes of heifers sprinkle those who have been defiled, sanctify them for the cleansing of the flesh, how much more will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to God, and cleansed our conscience from dead works to serve a living God. So we have a superior sacrifice, not only a superior high priest, but a superior sacrifice. Our sacrifice is not the blood of bulls and goats, but we find that the blood of Christ gives us eternal salvation because he was perfect without sin. And we wind up finding the grace of God. Now, I've mentioned that we need to understand the word typology. You'll find the principle of typology in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 1, because what we've seen here is a shadowy picture of the tabernacle and of the sacrifice system that was set up by God. But listen to what God himself says about this whole system that we see in Leviticus. For the law, since it is only a shadow of good things to come, and not the very form of things, can never, by the same sacrifices which will offer continually year by year, make perfect those who draw near. So here it tells us in Hebrews, Leviticus and the law of Leviticus is only a shadow of the things to come. Typology, I've kept telling you, the shadowy picture of things that Jesus would do, what he would accomplish, and that we would see fulfilled in the New Testament. And then finally, I want you to see that in Leviticus it tells us there's a covenant between God and his people. Now remember, the high priest had to enter into the Holy of Holies with fear and trembling, because if he had not properly cleansed himself, if he had not made the proper sacrifices, if there was any uncleanness in him, it would be sudden death for the high priest, sudden death, and no forgiveness for the people. The covenant that God had set between he and the people. But in Hebrews 10:19 it says, therefore, brethren, since we have a confidence to enter the holy place by the blood of Jesus, we can come boldly before the throne. Isn't it wonderful that we can come boldly before the throne, finding grace and mercy through faith rather than law and the possibility of death as we approach him? Yes, when Moses was given those directions on how to worship in the temple, in the tabernacle, those directions were a shadowy picture of the fact that we have a high priest who's superior in his mediation for us. We have a high priest who's superior in sacrifice, as his perfect blood gives us perfect forgiveness. And we have a better covenant, one not based on fear and law and legalism, but one that's based on faith and grace. You see, when you see this picture in Leviticus, that's when you really appreciate the grace, mercy, and the peace that comes through the new covenant with Jesus Christ. And that's my thought for the day. Don't forget to click on the link if you need to go back a lesson, or click on the other link if you want to share your faith with others, or if you want to see how you can have peace in a broken world. God bless you and have a great day. By the way, thank you, many of you, for sending in your get well wishes. I particularly enjoyed my one from all of the folks at Southside Baptist Church. I enjoyed looking at every signature and every name that was there. And I have such fond memories of all of you, and I love every one of you, and I think you know that. Thank you for your good wishes and for your prayers for my healing. God bless.